My name is Avinash, and I like chocolate. And as a kid, I wanted to become an astronaut. I wanted to discover new worlds, new civilizations. And when I was like 8, 9 years old, I realized, very, very mature, I realized in my lifetime, I'm not going to go farther than the moon or Mars if I'm lucky. But through virtual reality, I get to create these new worlds on a daily basis. So for me, this is a dream come true. I was born to do this. So today, I'll talk to you about what VR is, what we can use it for, the future of VR, and we'll have some time for some questions. So, most people, I guess, know what VR is, but in case you don't, a lot of people ask us like, oh, VR, that's like Google Glass, right? VR is not Google Glass. Google Glass is augmented reality. We've heard a lot about that. Augmented reality, to recap, is a technology where you wear glasses with a little camera, you see the world around you, and you get a layer of information on top of that. Augmented reality, not virtual reality. Virtual reality is also not a roller coaster. A lot of people have seen this clip going around on YouTube, and it makes for a fun video. But that guy trying the VR roller coaster is not having a good time. So that person will not try VR again. That person's kind of soured. What is VR? Well, it's technology that allows you to experience a different world. Either a world that doesn't exist, a different point in time, or a different physical location in the world. And this is not new. The whole thinking behind VR has been around since the dawn of, since the 1920s. I'll get back to that. But technology, in terms of VR, is interesting, but technology is useless if it does not have a meaningful application, if it doesn't relate to you as a person. So what do we do as people? We kind of have this inclination to share our experiences, to talk about what we've learned, what we've seen, what made us happy. And we've been doing that since the dawn of time, through cave paintings. We like to tell stories. And you can also do that by sitting around a campfire in a bar, talking, and then of course we have book printing, print technologies, we have book, and now we have film. Film started with these black and white TVs in your home. It became color TVs, larger screens, home cinema systems, even larger screens with surround sound, all the way up to current IMAX screens with 64-channel Dolby Atmos surround. Really cool. Now, why do these screens become bigger over time? And why does this sound technology become more impressive and more immersive over time? Well, exactly for that point, more immersion. As a storyteller, you want to immerse your viewer in the story that you want to tell. So, in that sense, virtual reality technology is kind of the ultimate storytelling machine. Surround sound. Your viewers, your users have never been more engaged with your content, with your story, than in VR, because they're completely immersed in your world. So, in that sense, it brings to the saying, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I may learn. With VR, that brings us to an interesting point. When you look at a film on a screen, either on your smartphone, on a tablet, or in a cinema, you engage your visual cortex. You remember, hey, I was in the cinema with some friends, I watched this cool movie. In a proper created VR experience, and proper created is important, you engage a different part of your brain. You engage the part of your brain where you create new memories. So if you experience a proper VR experience, you're not going to remember, oh, I saw this really cool thing. You will remember that you were somewhere else, that you learned something, that you heard someone speak, that you were on a holiday, if the content has been created properly. And this is not me just talking. This has recently been scientifically proven. You engage a different part of your brain through proper VR. Now, this technology is not new. In the 1920s, there were books about the concept of exploring different worlds. In the 1950s, 60s, NASA was exploring with VR to train astronauts instead of sending them on rockets into outer space. Then, in the 80s and 90s, we saw the video game industry. For them, VR was the holy grail. Because, I mean, I'm a gamer. Any gamers here? Quite a few. I mean, the ultimate gaming experience is not to see it on screen, but to actually step inside that world. That's what I wanted to do as a kid. So, of course, the games industry understood that. And to them, it was like, hey, if we can make that happen, we can sell more systems. That just makes sense. So they tried. They invested hundreds of millions in VR technology to make gaming VR a reality. And they failed miserably. They all tried. Sega, Sony, Nintendo, Atari. Didn't work out. Why? Well, there's three things that you need for a proper immersive VR experience. First of all, you need small, affordable, lightweight displays. That because you need to have an image in front of your eyes. Now, those displays didn't really exist in the 80s and 90s. Very low resolution, very expensive. Then, you need something called motion tracking. So if you see an image in front of your eyes, in VR, you'd want to look around. So with the VR headsets from the 80s, you would see an image in front of your eyes, you would turn your head, and then the image would follow. You would look back, and then the image would follow. That process is called lag, that delay that you feel. If you have that, you get nauseous. Not a fun experience. The third and really essential thing you need is stereoscopic 3D imaging. What the hell does that mean? Well, most people have two eyes in general. If you have two eyes, that allows you to see scale and depth, distance. Now, that's kind of what you would want to mimic in a proper VR experience. Didn't really work at the time. Most of the technology around that time was the equivalent of early cinema 3D, where you would get these plastic red and blue glasses that would force your eyes into this weird weird 3D perspective. It would not feel natural. Nintendo at the time had a product called the Virtua Boy, where they tried to create VR gaming with 3D. It forced your eyes to do something that was very unnatural. I personally don't know anyone that lasts longer than 5 minutes in a Virtua Boy game. So, didn't really work. Also, I was talking about lightweight. That headset that you see on the left weighs about 6.5 kilos. That balances on your head. Not really a lightweight, comfortable experience. Motion tracking, the system that you see on your right, didn't really work at the time. So, at the same time, in terms of gaming reality, we got a very different vision of what VR was supposed to be from Hollywood. We saw movies like Lawnmower Man and Strange Days and The Matrix. Has anyone seen The Matrix? This is yes, this is no. You can engage. Anyway. The thing with the Matrix is you get this metal pin that sticks in the back of your head, not very marketable or comfortable. So that didn't really pan out. But the Hollywood vision was kind of this thing where you would wear these big suits and you would see this crappy CGI version of yourself. Whereas Oculus, the company that you've probably heard of that launched the Oculus headset 3 years ago, their main goal was, let's create the ultimate VR gaming experience. That's what we do. So my previous company, Disrupt, created digital content, computer animations, 3D animations, music videos, you name it. And personally, I'm a gamer, so I was like, hang on, what if we get one of these early prototype VR headsets and we use our 3D animation skills to create content in that headset and sell that to our clients? That would make sense. So we started writing a bit of code, playing around. Kind of cool. Very powerful technology. Relevant to me as a tech geek and a gamer, but not relevant to my grandma or my neighbor because they're not techies. They're not they don't play games. They don't have that interest. So we thought, what if we can make that vision that we saw in Hollywood, that completely fictional sci-fi thing, into an actual reality? Well, people told us, nah, that's not possible. Because what do you need to do for a realistic VR experience? You want to film that. Now, you can film that with a 360 camera. Fine, you get a number of cameras, put them in a circle, shoot an image, there you go. But what happens? If you would shoot a natural 3D movie for cinema, you get two cameras next to each other, one for the left eye, one for the right eye. If you duplicate that with a circular camera, we get one circular camera for the left eye, one circular camera for the right eye, and you look to the left. Suddenly there's a camera in the way. You look to the right, suddenly there's a camera in the way. So you kind of need to solve that problem of creating an invisible camera. So all the camera companies that we've worked with, we called, and they all told us, you guys are batshit crazy. It's not possible. It's not going to work. But that's exactly what we did. 3 years ago, we created one of the first cameras, patented cameras, that does capture a 360 horizontal image, a 360 vertical image without a blind spot. So you can look up and down without seeing a big logo. You just see the world as you would see it naturally. And it's all in stereoscopic natural 3D. So it feels that you're actually there. But the thing with the cameras is, it's cool and we got a lot of press for that, but it's not really important. What's way more important is the way you apply this technology. Well, we noticed that when we put people in headsets and they try on our experiences, you see the corners of the mouth go up, they become happy, they get slack-jawed, wow, wow. So we bring people moments of joy, which is way more important than bringing people a piece of technology. And we take this technology way beyond gaming. We take this into healthcare, education, and lots of stuff. And we got some exposure on that. We were invited to the BBC. world alive to explain why technology like VR is not a gimmick, why it can actually change the world. And of course, we got a lot of Dutch press. We got to present to the Dutch king, but I'm not objective. So, I mean, I can talk about this for hours, but just Google us, download our app, see what we do, and draw your own conclusions. I'll talk about where we are now with VR. So there's a bunch of devices. There's Samsung with the Gear VR. There's Oculus with the first consumer version. That's now for sale. The HTC have jumped in. They've created the Vive headset. Sony are releasing the PlayStation VR. Well, Sony already has 40 million installed PlayStation 4 units. If only a small percentage of that convert to the PlayStation headset, there's a huge market out there. So we take VR technology beyond gaming. We make technology that allows you to experience things that were not possible before. And of course, nowadays, you don't really need all these fancy high-end headsets that you spend $500, $600, $700, $800 for. If you have a smartphone, suddenly you have a VR device in your pocket. So suddenly, we are talking to hundreds of millions of potential people that can use our experiences. And in terms of installing apps, who likes to install apps? You don't really need to do that anymore as well. You can just go to Facebook, who activated the VR timeline not too long ago, and within Facebook, you can actually see a 360 video. You don't need to install any software. And of course, more and more brands are putting really cool content, like Star Wars, into these VR 360 experiences. And of course, you can download our app, which will give you a bit more of a high-end experience if you have a smartphone, an iPhone or an Android phone, which most people have. Now, what do we do with this technology? One of the first things that we created was a little boat ride through the pretty canals of Amsterdam. We tested that in our offices, and we discovered this weird thing. We would sit people down, they would put them in the headset, they would look around for a couple of minutes, and be on a really casual boat tour. They would take off the headset, they would look around again, and they would ask the host, well, where's the fan, and where's the heat blower? I'm like, what? Why? The thing is, they felt the heat of the sun. They felt wind in their face. And we had not expected that. But we learned that if you give enough powerful visual cues, realistic cues, your brain's kind of flexible and fills in the rest. It fills in the blanks. Now, this does not happen with everyone. But 1, 2 people out of every 10 started coming back with these questions. And that triggered us to discover, to explore, to work with universities, to research why certain things do or do not work. But of course, there's also fun stuff, entertainment stuff. You can go to a concert that you missed, or you can be on stage with your favorite artist. We can make you do things that are physically not possible. We can make you fly, which people kind of like to do for some reason. But there's, of course, applications in architecture. Instead of doing a 3D render, you can actually walk through the design that you've created. Or you can go, let's say, I mean, this is summer. There's a lot of music festivals. Let's say you go to Lowlands and you pick the main stage where your favorite artist is playing. Without exception, afterwards you always hear from your friends, hang on, I was at this other stage and this new band was playing and it was really cool and you missed it. Now you can go back in time through VR and relive that. But again, we go beyond that. What if you're 80, 85 and you would want to see the London Symphony Orchestra play, but you are not physically able to go there? Through VR technology, we can actually, from the safety and comfort of your own home, put you right next to the conductor or in the best seats of the house. Healthcare. Not everyone can afford 30, 40 physical therapy sessions a year. What if you have 1, 2 sessions in the gym with your instructor, you go home, you install the app, and suddenly you're there. You're back in the gym next to your instructor. He's showing you what to do. You do your exercises, and suddenly you can go through your entire healthcare regime without spending all that money. Agoraphobia. Let's say you don't dare to go outside anymore. This happens. This can set on over time. You put on the headset, and suddenly you're sitting on a bench on a sunny day in the park. A month later, you put it on again. You're in the street. There's some kids playing. 3 months down the line, you put it again. You see a couple of people walking down. 6 months down the line, suddenly you're able to actually take a walk around the block again. That way, you give someone their freedom back. That's a life-changing experience. Medical applications, we created an experience where you are actually in the operating room. You can see what the doctor is doing. You can see what the surgeon is doing, and instead of during your studies, if you can attend 1 or 2 or 3 operations, that's a lot. For the first time in history, you and your fellow students can see the exact same operation, not just from a VR standpoint, but you can actually see through the eyes, through a head cam, see what the surgeon is doing, see what the anesthesiologist is doing, and discuss what you've observed, what you've learned. This has not been possible before in history. Fashion, I mean, we've created virtual fashion shows that gained a lot of press, but what's So there's a lot of experiences out there. There's a lot of potential applications. Now, how do you make these applications? That's another interesting thing. When we started out, there were not a lot of VR cameras out there. So people were spending like $500,000 on these red Epic cameras that you see on these screens to make a VR experience. An experience for Mini, they had this big camera that it didn't fit in the car. So they cut off the entire top of the car, put in the camera, shot what it needed to shoot, and recreate the entire top of the car in CGI because the cameras didn't fit. So really expensive, not really comfortable, and not an easy way to create this content. Now, on the other end of the scale, we see consumer-generated content. Small devices that are hitting the market this year, a couple of $100, and suddenly you have a small device that you hold in your hand, you press a button, and suddenly you have a 360-degree video. So everyone can create content, which is kind of cool. Low resolution, not that high quality in terms of frame rate, but it is there. And the moment that people start being able to create their own content, you kind of get the ball rolling. We start to do stuff that's interesting for the mass market. And there's this new segment in between where you see cameras that have been designed from the ground up to create virtual experiences. Now, the thing on the left is something called the Lightro camera. It captures light field. That allows us not to just look around in a VR experience, but actually move. The camera doesn't exist yet. It's a fictional concept, but it'll get there. On the right, you see a camera made by Unit 9, which captures a funny or a pretty high-quality 360 image, and in the middle is one of our cameras. But again, camera technology, it'll in a couple of years, probably in a couple of months, creating VR content, filming it is going to be a level playing field. Everyone will be able to create this content, but that does not mean that everyone is Ridley Scott or James Cameron. That means you need to learn a language, how to tell a story in VR. But there's a couple of practical applications or practical things as well. When you shoot something with a VR camera, you get all these different images because there's all these different lenses looking in all these different directions. Now you see that all these images have a different amount of light, a different lens distortion. You need to fix all that. And you see these two dancers that are standing right in the middle of two lenses. That's called a stitch line. That doesn't look really appealing, especially when you would see this in a VR headset. You're looking at people that are cut in half. Not very pleasant. So the first thing that you need to learn is to bring these images together, to glue them together. There's a couple of interesting tools out there that can help you do that. They're not really good. So we've created our own technology to make this stuff look really good. In this case, you see the result of the previous footage. It's all color corrected. It's plain yes. It's one you do not see any stitching artifacts. This is a pixel perfect image, which is kind of what you want to get away from the technical limitations, and you want to be able to have a good technology to tell your story. Now, telling a story, that's actually the most important part. We get a lot of scripts from directors who are like, oh, hey, hang on, we can write a script for VR. 9 out of 10 times it does not really work because you cannot think linear anymore. We create a lot of commercials. Now, commercials generally are like 30, 40, 60 seconds in length. With VR, you need a bit more time for each shot. You need roughly 18 to 20 seconds per shot. In a 60-second commercial, that means you can tell 3 shots. It's not a long story. But what if you can have 5 minutes of content in those 60 seconds? So imagine this. You put on a headset, and suddenly you're standing in Times Square, New York. In front of you is a 50-man big band playing. So you hear them playing, you hear all the loud noises, you hear the traffic, you look around. By the time you establish where you are, you're already 30, 40 seconds down into the story. Right before the end of the clip, you hear these screeching tires, you hear a bang to your right. You look to your right, and suddenly you see a bike messenger and a cab that crashed into each other. You just see the cab messenger get out and yelling at the bike messenger who's crawling up, but you don't really know what happened. So we rewind. We rewatch this film from the first second. You're watching, and you decide to turn to the right because you want to see what happens. As you turn, you see this big window behind you, and you're standing in front of a diner. Now, behind the diner, there's this really well-dressed couple, a man and a woman, but they're having an argument. The argument heats up. The lady gets up in a long dress or high heels, storms out the diner, steps outside into the street, hails a cab, and the bike messenger just swerves around her and misses her. We go back one more time, and now we notice that across from the square, there's a guy with a telelens taking pictures of us. We don't know why. Could be that if from the start we had watched the couple behind us, that could have led to a romantic comedy. If we had focused on the cabbie, that could have led to an action adventure. If we had focused on the guy with the telelens, we could have learned that he's not actually taking pictures of us. He was hired by the wife of the guy sitting behind us who she suspected of having an affair. So suddenly, there's these layers. There's 5 minutes of story in this 60-second experience, as long as you write it in a very different way. Now, if you're a director, you're used to working with a frame. You're used to working with an edit. In this case, you don't really have a frame because the viewer can look everywhere. So how do you deal with that? How do you direct someone's attention? In this case, you can do a lot of things with sound, spatial audio. You hear a voice there, you hear a sound there, which will allow the user to look around. Then there's tons of tools like that, and it's a completely different visual language that we've developed over the past few years. Now, if you're a movie producer, your job becomes even harder, because normally when you're producing a film, you look at your frame, you design that part of your set. Can you imagine how difficult it is to look at Times Square and control the entire Times Square in terms of traffic, extras, pedestrians, etc., lights? Really difficult, so you need some different solutions for that. And that's kind of what we do. We've created a lot of technologies and production methods to make that happen. So in the past few years, we went from really complex headsets to working with a smartphone to having a piece of cardboard that can allow you to experience a VR experience. Now, what's happening with this technology? Of course, there's music, sports, and entertainment, but we're seeing application in, for example, the retail industry. We're designing virtual concept stores. People come up with these concepts. You can walk through a store, look at signage, routing, and all of that. Commercial, not that exciting, but it's a big market that is evolving. With all current VR experiences, these are kind of solitary experiences. You wear the headset and it's just you looking at a concert, looking at a VR film, or what have you. But is it that much fun to go to a concert on your own? Not really. You want to share that experience with your friends, which is what we started out with. So that's coming. What if you could wear the headset and suddenly look next to you, and your friend who's living in London while you're living here in Amsterdam is standing next to you, and suddenly you're watching the New York Philharmonic play in Central Park, New York. Now that's not really fictional. This is happening right now. Of course, one big thing that needs to happen is interfaces, which requires a lot of creative thinking. We daily get the question, like, oh, can you remodel, can you create a VR experience of our store or of our library? Sure we could, but does that make sense? Does it make sense to have a virtual library and walk around and find something? Of course not. You want to deliver that kind of experience, that kind of information to the user in a completely different way. So that requires a different way of thinking. Now, as I was saying, multi-user experiences are really important. Immersing yourself in that world in stereoscopic 3D that's kind of what you need to do to get people to believe in that world. The one thing that you cannot do currently with filmed VR is walk around. People put on the headset, they're amazed, like, oh, this is really cool, and the next thing they do is they try to step off a building, or they try to grab something, which doesn't really work. Now here's something called The Void, and I'll show you a clip, which gets me really excited. Take a look. Now this gets me really excited. Playing games like this with your friends. Yeah. Well, where the future of VR is going to bring us, I don't have all the answers, but I know that we are on a path to change the world. We are going beyond gaming. We are creating VR applications that will make your lives happier, make your lives better. We would love nothing more than to take you along in this journey with us. So thank you for your attention, and come to me with your questions after.